Hi, Davi here, and today we have a new video in the YouTube channel, and today we'll be checking out the work of Noru, a South Korean artist, or Sahyang10 on Twitter. I will link, by the way, this artist's links in the description below. Noru is actually quite similar to another artist that I believe I reviewed named Chojang or Wan Young Yoon. I will also link their work in the down below, but in terms of their style, they're very similar in terms of like the body proportions, the facial features, and even like the design shapes for like the wings, the swords, anything outside of the human figure. Although I do notice the rendering is quite different, so let's go through some of his or their pieces on ArtStation. By the way, I found this person's artwork first through X or Twitter, and I do recommend you follow them here too because there's way more recent stuff, and maybe there's a bit more sketches being posted here because it's just more recent and less portfolio-ish. Like you do get to see some snapshots, some whips maybe, or work in progress shots. So yeah, I will link all of this below. So I have noticed that obviously it's mainly character art, kind of like I do notice in South Korea they do a lot of character designs, and it's a bit different because there's way more exaggeration when it comes to like the shapes. And let me just find something kind of like this one, where a lot of the shots are fairly simple. If you focus on the figure itself, like they're not in a very dynamic pose. It's very close to a standing position, but they compensate via, say, in this case, oh shit, let me just bring out my pen app. In this case, they do compensate, say, with any element that's outside of the human figure. So let me just bring this pen kind of tool here and use this guy. So with this wing, like look at how it's so bold, and like it takes a lot of the composition, or it takes a lot of the space in this composition, but the figure itself is pretty standard. So sometimes in this case it's the wing, or maybe it's some kind of weapon. Like that's what's actually veering away from that center line, and that's usually where the character is, you know. So I have noticed that in their work, where when it comes to these sorts of super intricate types of designs, character designs, they like to keep the figure in one spot and then compensate with everything else. For example, in this case, it's going to be these huge arms, or secondary huge arms. Like she does have smaller arms here, or the main arms, but she has like these super humongous sorts of things on the side, right? But then again, the pose is still one. It's still that one kind of thing, and then it's this sort of cross section that makes it more dynamic. And I think it's a great way to do these sorts of design presentations. If you're focusing on one piece, just keep the pose fairly simple, fairly standard, close to a standing position or a stable vertical position, and then you compensate with the design elements. Even the hands themselves, like the main hands, the actual hands here, it's still fairly simple. There's no like waving of the sword, but it's these extra stuff. Even the way, let's go back here, even the way the sword in the back, it kind of goes against the verticalness of the figure, and obviously this again, and even the side sword here, even the arm was kind of protruding out from that main line in the center. So I think that's something that I've learned from this person's artwork. Now, when it comes to the rendering, I have noticed, now this one is actually a bit, the pose it's more of a dynamic position, but I think it's not the the usual kind of thing, but it still has the same rendering kind of approach, but it is fairly different. It's more of an action pose and not like a design presentation piece. And I do like the character designs too, like the actual sketches, the developmental or schematic designs where you're kind of trying to figure out which design works best. And doing these in thumbnails obviously saves a lot of time, and it's something that often you don't see when it comes to these sorts of portfolios, but I'm glad that you're showing this side, the preliminary stages where you do have to figure things out beforehand before really investing time in doing these detailed kind of paintings or renderings or illustrations. Now, when it comes to the actual rendering, yes, it's still similar to Chojang in a way, but I do notice a bit of that white tint in their rendering or painting style, and it reminds me of the work of Zeen Chin. I think I did an art review too of his work before, but it has that pastel kind of tint or vibe. If you look at, say, the pretty much everything, whether it's the skin, the armor, you will see a bit of that white gray blended in. And I think that that's what gives it this chalky pastel kind of vibe. Like just imagine a chalkboard and look at how sometimes you or when you see chalk smudged around a chalkboard or some pastel colors around paper, it does have that vibe. And I think it's a nice blend of, say, Chojang and Zeen Chin. I will link Zeen Chin's work too in the description below. But to kind of add another artist to this list, because if you look at all of the character designs here, there is a bit of that border effect in general, where, let me just try zooming in, where on the outside you will see like a darker line, like a silhouette, like it envelops the silhouette of the whole, whether it's the extra elements or the actual main character. And another artist who does this, I think is also South Korean, is Rinotuna or Rinotuna, whatever. And I think I did an art review too of his work before, so I will link all of these artists down below. But I think Noru here is employing all sorts of like, he's a great blend of all of these artists. Not to take away from his actual uniqueness, I mean, he is his own guy, but that's just what I see, where he's sort of a blend of this rendering style that's similar to Zeen Chin, a presentation style where you have the border effects like Rinotuna, and character designs too, because Rinotuna does a lot of similar work. But the exaggerated shapes and everything is very similar to Chojang. Let's just zoom in on this. Look at how the legs are so elongated, right? But still the position is fairly like standard vertical, but the crossing of the crossing, or the contradiction, the contrast of the gun and the arm. It's almost like a swastika right there. Shit. But the point is, and sometimes there's like graphical elements being included in the background. I mean, I do notice this more often. It's getting more popular, I guess, to some extent, because it almost looks like a magazine spreadsheet, and it just makes more sense, especially when you're doing more digital work, because it helps if your pieces are a bit more graphic, a bit more, because it stands out a bit more if you add some text and stuff like that. But I know if you zoom in, you do see still that kind of black border. Let me just, maybe if you can't see it, just zoom in right here. But it's very thin, but it pretty much envelops the entire character, and oftentimes the character is superimposed on a white basic background, or kind of a plain color background. And what really makes it stand out even more, I guess, is the rendering. aside from the actual shape design, it's the rendering. For example, the jeans. I mean, come on, the folds, how it kind of tucks in. It's kind of sensual in a way, right? Very baggy pants, but it just looks correct. It does feel flat in some areas, obviously, like the arms. I think you do see way more rendering, say, with the hair, the shirt, and the jeans here. But yeah, it's a good blend. It's a very nice blend, and it kind of reminds me of Duck Kong as well. Am I saying it right? Another artist who does these sorts of highly illustrated pieces. But yeah. So this one's a more of a special piece because it's very action oriented, like it's very dynamic. It's not like a standard, you don't have a vertical stable position. It's more of a like a keyframe of sorts or a poster shot. Some character designs here. Again, the facial anatomy or the proportions are very similar to Chojang. We do see a couple of styles from, well, shit, damn. We do see a variety of like standard styles from South Korea, and I think this is one of them. Very round head, and the eyes are often fairly apart. Is she biting her lip? Damn. And the nose is very simplified. It almost doesn't exist, but you know, there's like a slight protruding thing, but that's it. Now, this one does feel more like a sketch because I think they do add the borderline in the end. And if you notice the brushwork, it's very non-textured. There are no texture brushes being used, so it does have that more cleaner look to it. Look at the way the hair is done. She has a mole here. Oh wow. And yeah, you know what? It does have a bit of that texture, which makes it look like chalk. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's a very minimal, sort of imperfect blending, where you can see like the brush strokes, but it's very minimal. But when you zoom out, you can still get the average of it. So it looks like a chalk or pastel painting or rendering. Interesting. A bit graphic, but hopefully this won't get blocked. It's not that bad, but I do see some hue variety here, some greens, some blues. Maybe it's some bruising shit. So it's a bit harsh, but interesting. Look at how it does get more vague as you go further out. You can see way more brush strokes, and it does get bigger as you go further out. And you will see a lot of this. I guess, let me just You will see a lot of this in Zeen Chin's work. Maybe less of this because Zeen Chin likes to really finish up his work to like a fully illustrated piece, but this part right here is very common. Like this kind of vibe, this kind of visual look, rendering style, where it's kind of fine, but you can still see that it looks somewhat natural or traditional because of that slight texture. No harsh texture brushes, very minimal, but it has a very presentable, eye-catching look. Now this one reminds me more of like Rinotuna, and the face here, like the character design, the facial body types reminds me of Chojang. So if you really want to understand what I'm trying to say, or if you're interested in achieving this sort of look, I recommend you check out their work as well. This one, again, some graphic elements in the background. I'm guessing the lasso tool is being used. Again, same thing. Stable position, fuck, so big. Stable. Some slight curve, but it's still fairly stable. Contrast, and then contrast with the text in the background. So whether it's text, whether it's like a big weapon in the back, a sword, even the clothes, it acts like a way to sort of shift the weight, because you have the body leans here, right? The actual figure slightly. It's still vertical, but it leans to the left. So you need something bigger on the right, and you'll see it way more in this area. Some of the clothes are here, or the jacket thing, but most of it is on the right side to counterbalance the figure that's going left, right? So you will see some of these compositional decisions, and you can apply to your own work. Same thing here. Look at how big the weapons are in the back, like the sword, even the shoes. And you'll notice these characters tend to be kind of petite, kind of small, especially if they're women, right? It's a very nice contrast. Everything else is big, and it's almost like they're being surrounded by, their own attire, their own tools, their own weapons. But I think it helps to constrain it or to frame it. For example, yes, everything is kind of contrasting, so it helps with the composition and all. This big kind of spear thing, the big sword in the back, or it carries a bunch of other weapons, and then this other sword right here. We have those, but a lot of these big elements, even this blue thing in the background, it sort of frames the character in. So I'm not sure what that's doing. Maybe it's because there's no background or there's no environment, so it feels empty if it's like just a basic like character with white, with a plain white or basic colored background. So maybe these elements can compensate for that lack of background. So in a way, all of the swords and stuff, all of the extra stuff that's not in the figure becomes sort of its environment. So you're kind of creating your own environment with this character design. Hopefully you're getting what I'm saying here, but I think it's interesting. And it's sort of a shortcut in a way. For example, here, you don't really have a lot of elements on the side. So you do have to add a bit more, say for the floors. I do see some dead fish here. And the background is a bit more, it's still vague, but it's a bit more, there's a few more values, I guess, to kind of make this character pop out even more. Even the lighting, she's kind of partly in shadow, and then her shoulder here, her right arm or left arm rather, from her perspective, and a part of her pants are kind of being lit. So there's this kind of contrasting between the light and dark. But yeah, the point is, you don't really need much. If you have a simple, sort of clean silhouette, then you're going to have to add a bit more in the background, I guess. Now in this case, look at how the wings, the spears, even these skeletons in the background, they're all kind of framing. Even though they're kind of going out, they're also pinning the character within. So if you have this sort of range of different elements, it creates its own environment, which means you don't need much in the background, right? So if you're doing more presentational pieces, I think this tip can really help you. And it just balances out the look. For example, again, now this piece, very stable. The silhouette is not as unique or not as like bold or crazy. So even though the background is white, you do need to add a bit of color or some kind of value range when it comes to the background colors. Now maybe they could have added a bit more, but yeah, it is a bit more rendered. So maybe look at this. I mean, it's still nice, but because it doesn't have like a background or any kind of elements kind of pinning it, it feels like this person is floating. So there's almost like a lost vibe. I mean, as a character design, if you're just selling this as it is, fine. But when it comes to like doing like single shot pieces, obviously you need to add a bit more, but the rendering's still good. I like it. Or I think we're circling back here. Again, it's nice to see like the breakdowns of the attire, the fashion stuff, the breakdowns, the different weapons, swords and stuff. Um, but yeah, look at this piece. I think the table is broken. It seems like it's a very oh shit. She's kind of a painter, maybe doing some sketches over maybe tiger. This white Siberian, white-haired tiger. But it looks nice. You know, if you just zoom in again, do you see a lot of like texture work? Not much. The brushes are fairly basic. I do see a basic round brush, which is very common amongst these artists. They're not really painterly in that sense. They like rendering their work, where they'll draw out the character and then they'll zoom in and do their painting that way. So it feels more like a rendering rather than a painting. You don't see a lot of smudges being used. It's very kind of old school in that way, where it's more design oriented, but in the end it still looks very presentable. And now for the background, it's just white because you already have a very dynamic thing here. You have the character, you have the tiger, you have the broken table, and it's all framing this chick in the middle, right? It's all kind of looping in or swooping in around her, encircling her, right? That's interesting. So that's it for this art review of Noru. Check out his work on ArtStation, on Twitter or X. And I do recommend checking out the works of the other recommended artists that I've mentioned in this review. So it's Chojang for like the proportions, the shape design. For the rendering, I would recommend Zeen Chin, especially the painting stuff. And then for the presentation and also some character design, Rinotuna. So that's it. Sorry for this art review, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.